talk to yourself, about your state of mind, about your battery.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast.
Minisode.
My wife and I just made a purchase of an RV, a fifth wheel actually. It's the first fifth wheel I've ever owned, but I've certainly owned trailers in the past. And one of the things about trailers, especially self-contained trailers, we're talking camping trailers, by the way, those that you either pull behind your truck, put on the back of your truck, or in the case of a fifth wheel like we have now, it's a gooseneck that goes down inside the middle of the truck, a little easier to pull. And one of the things you've got to remember, of course, is to maintain your batteries. Now, RVs typically, recreational vehicles typically use what's called a deep cycle battery, and they are made to be drawn on, meaning they're made to be used and be charged and recharged and discharged and go back and forth and have a very long life doing that. They're different than say a car battery or a battery you might have in a motorcycle, or even the batteries that you have around your house, say in a flashlight or something else. Deep cycle batteries are made to be used, and they're made to put a heavy load on, but there are certain things that you simply have to do to keep them maintained. Otherwise, you spend a lot of money for something that is not going to last you very long. Speaking of spending money on things that will last you a long time, what about changing the way that you completely do your appraisal business? What about changing the way that you keep track of all of the orders, that you keep track of where your appraisers are, even if you're a single person entity? What about keeping track of your schedule and your notes and your work file and the steps along the process of each of the appraisals that you do? Well, folks, ANOW software will do that for you and more. When I say more, I could spend the next 30, 45 minutes talking about the different features that are available and that we use on a regular basis with ANOW software. Folks, if you're not using it, if you're using a spreadsheet or some other way to keep track of your orders, please check them out. Go to anow.com to find out more. Again, it's anow.com. And we're back. Dustin Harris hanging out in the podcast chair, talking today about RV batteries, deep cycles. They sometimes call them marine batteries. They use them on boats as well. The key to maintaining and having a high charge on these batteries is maintaining them. And by maintaining them, it's not just keeping the proper amount of fluids in there and keeping them dry and out of the weather, and that you don't have extremes in heat and extremes in cold, but it's also about keeping a good charge on these batteries. Now, typically what happens when you work with this type of battery, most people use what's called a battery trickle charger or a topper, sometimes it's called. I happen to use a company called Battery Tender. It's one that I've used for many years on my motorcycles, snow machines, ATVs, and trailers, boats and trailers. And the purpose of this type of charger is to simply keep a very low, and I'm talking less than 5-watt charge on a pretty regular basis. And the Tender actually kind of, it's dual purpose. So it will give charge when it's needed, but it will back off when it's not. So for example, if your battery is going low, the battery tender will recognize that, and it will give a very slow, very low amperage so that it will charge that battery up slow and steady. It's not a quick charge like you would get with, say, jumper cables or a typical charge box. And the purpose is you keep this on all the time, right? So with a typical charge on a battery, you don't typically leave your jump cables on or your jump box on. You use it in emergencies when you're ready to go to church on Sunday morning and your car doesn't start. So you get the other car and you jump start it, or you go get the charge box and you throw it on there, but you take that off. Or you've got a battery that's going bad, you put it on overnight at say 2 amps, and it will charge overnight, and then the next morning your battery will be good to go. A tender is a little bit different in the sense that it tends, that's the name, tender, it tends to the battery, and it pays attention to when it starts to deplete, and then it gives it just a little bit of a boost. Now hopefully you can see where I'm going with this mini-sode today, right? Talk to yourself, about your state of mind, about your battery, right? Maybe it's time for a jump start. Maybe it's time to put everything on hold and say, you know what, I need to travel. I need to take a break. I need a staycation. I need something, right? I need something to boost me, right? Maybe you need a charge, more of a long charge that you would get with a battery box, whatever that might mean for you. But the key principle here today, the question that I would ask you is, are you tending to yourself? Are you tending to your battery? Are you tending to your abilities and your psychology, your mental state, your spiritual state, your physical state. These are not things that typically can be fixed with a jump start. These are things that have to continually be watched and continually be checked on. And when you start to dip down, you start to bring it up. Now, let me tell you something. One thing about the tender is that it is not enough amperage, it's not enough watts to bring a low battery up to full capacity. That is not what the tender is for. If you have a battery that you have not maintained and it goes so low that you need to charge it back up, well, guess what? You're either going to need to jump it or you're going to have to use a charge box. You're not going to be able to use the tender. It just is not that type of tool. What the tender does is it recognizes when things start to dip slightly, and that's the key here, and then it pushes them back up. Now, the thing about a tender is you don't have to schedule it. A thing about a tender is it stays on all the time, unless you're actively using the motorcycle, ATV, trailer, what have you. And of course, you would take it off for that. But if you're not using, if you're storing it in the garage or a storage unit, or in my case, out in the woods near my house, I'm going to keep that tender on all the time because its job is to maintain. Its job is to boost just a little bit. My question, my good friends, my appraisers, my peers, my colleagues, my listeners, what are you doing to tend to your life? Don't wait until you are depleted to tend to your life. That's not the purpose of a tender. A tender is to take time regularly. On a regular basis, I take Fridays off, Saturdays off, Sundays off, sometimes Mondays off. And the purpose is to tend to my life. The purpose is to get some on R&R. The purpose is to maintain. My wife and I have had a great habit, I believe, from the very beginning of our marriage. Before we were married, we sat down and said, what are some things that we want? A couple of things came to mind. Number one, we want to take a family vacation every year, and we do. That's more of a jump start, right? That's more of a let's go get the jumper cables and get going again. But the other thing we said was our marriage is important. And before we have kids come along in our home, we have 4 of them now, but this was long before children, we said we are going to continue to date throughout the remainder of our lives. And we have made a very, very conscious effort. And when I say, this is no exaggeration, when I say 3 out of 4 weeks we go on a date Friday nights, I'm telling you 3 out of 4 weeks we go on a date Friday nights. That is a very high priority for us. That is part of tending to our marriage. You need to tend to your marriage, your relationships, your children, your health, your mental state, your spiritual state, your business. Ask yourself, where is it that you need a little tending? Thank you for joining me today. Speaking of tending, I would love to help you to do that more in your life through the All-Star Team. That is a great way to bounce ideas off of individuals, specifically when it comes to building your business, growing your business, being more efficient, being able to do more with less. I see so many overwhelmed appraisers. Folks, let me help you. Check it out by going to my website, theappraisercoach.com/memberships.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star Team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.
Use what's called a battery topper or a filter or, sorry, editor. Let me back up. I got to remember the name of this. It is battery trickle charge. Okay.